We often think of death as a final punctuation mark, a point where the story of someone's consciousness ends, where the music of their existence falls silent. Yet, for as long as humans have walked the earth, there has been a persistent whisper in the shadows. What if the end of the body is not the end of the self? What if, in some form, the essence we call a soul lingers, drifting through the spaces we inhabit, sometimes noticed, sometimes unseen, like a faint echo of a song we once knew? Tonight, we explore the possibility that the departure of the body does not signal disappearance, but a transformation. That perhaps consciousness, unshackled from its physical shell, continues to wander, observing, remembering, and sometimes interacting with the living world. The idea of a soul moving through the world after death is not new. Cultures across the globe have told stories of spirits lingering in familiar places, of ancestors walking among their descendants, of shadows flickering at the edge of perception. In Japan, the concept of yurei captures the spirits of the dead who have unfinished business or unresolved emotions. In parts of Africa, spirits are considered guardians, watching over family and community. Even in Western folklore, ghostly apparitions have long been described as restless remnants, sometimes benevolent, sometimes unsettling, tethered to the places and memories they left behind. These stories suggest a deep-seated human intuition, that life does not simply vanish, that consciousness may not be strictly bound to the living body. Modern science is cautious. Neuroscience tells us that the brain produces consciousness, that when the neural networks collapse, awareness ceases. Yet there are phenomena that resist simple explanations. Near-death experiences, reports of lingering presences, unexplained feelings of being watched. These anecdotes cannot be fully explained by current models of physics or biology. Could these be glimpses of a consciousness that is more than the sum of its neural impulses? Or are they projections of our own fear, memory, and imagination? The line between perception and reality becomes blurred when we begin to consider what it might mean for a soul to wander after the body is gone. Imagine a world where consciousness, freed from its corporeal limitations, continues to exist as a form of subtle energy, moving through familiar landscapes. Perhaps it hovers in the places it once loved, lingering in the scent of a garden, the curve of a staircase, the quiet corners of a home. Perhaps it drifts over fields and forests, unseen but attentive, absorbing fragments of life, observing the ongoing dance of the world without the constraints of flesh. In this scenario, death is not a conclusion, but a transition, a transformation from visible form to something far subtler, a presence that can interact with our world in ways we barely understand. Accounts of such presences are surprisingly common. People describe sudden chills, unexplained sounds, or fleeting glimpses of figures in familiar places. Some report more profound experiences, objects moving without cause, voices echoing in empty rooms, or the unmistakable sense that someone who has passed is watching over them. These phenomena raise questions. Are they proof of lingering souls, or simply the mind's attempt to process absence and grief? Neuroscience might suggest the latter, explaining these experiences as manifestations of memory, emotion, or expectation. But even in skeptical circles, certain patterns persist that defy simple psychological explanation. Moments where multiple witnesses report similar phenomena simultaneously, or events that leave tangible traces beyond the observers themselves. What could a wandering consciousness want? Is it simply observing, reliving fragments of its own life? Some traditions suggest that spirits remain near the living to guide, warn, or comfort. Others propose that the lingering is tied to unresolved business, emotions that remain tangled at the moment of death, or attachments that refuse to release their grip. Grief, love, regret, desire, and fear could act as invisible tethers, binding the soul to the world it left behind. In this way, a spirit's presence becomes less a haunting and more a reflection of the emotional landscape that persisted at the moment of death. Yet wandering does not necessarily imply interaction. If consciousness can exist independently of the body, what form would it take? Could it move unseen, silent, observing without interference, like a shadow cast by memory itself? Or might it manifest in ways perceptible to the living, through shapes, sounds, or sensations that hint at presence without fully revealing it? In some cultures, spirits are described as luminous or translucent, ephemeral and delicate, existing in a state between the tangible and intangible. In others, they are experienced as feelings: a sudden warmth, a soft breeze in a closed room, a pressure against the chest that suggest awareness without form. Perhaps the soul's wandering is subtle by necessity, for it exists in a dimension that overlaps with ours only at certain points, revealing itself in fragments, glimpses, and impressions. Scientific exploration into the persistence of consciousness is still in its infancy, but there are intriguing avenues of study. Quantum physics has prompted speculation about the nature of consciousness as a non-local phenomenon, not entirely confined to the physical brain. Some theorists propose that awareness may exist as patterns of energy, capable of persisting beyond the cessation of neural activity. Near-death experiences often describe vivid consciousness continuing outside the body. Heightened perception, movement through strange realms, encounters with beings of light, that suggest the mind is capable of existing without traditional sensory input. While these reports are subjective and anecdotal, they raise compelling questions. If consciousness can experience without a body, could it also linger, observing the world it once inhabited? Consider the emotional impact of a soul lingering in the spaces it once occupied. A child might sense a deceased parent's presence in a particular chair, feeling inexplicable reassurance or warmth. A partner might sense the subtle comfort of a lost loved one in a familiar room. Places of deep significance, homes, gardens, hospitals, graveyards, become repositories of memory, emotion, and perhaps lingering consciousness. In this context, the world itself is alive not just with the living, but with echoes of the departed, with traces of presence that shape our perception of reality. The boundary between past and present blurs as life and afterlife coexist in subtle layers we rarely perceive. But wandering can also be more unsettling. Stories of spirits lingering due to trauma, anger, or attachment remind us that consciousness may carry the weight of unresolved experience. A soul might linger not out of desire to harm, but because it is bound to experiences it cannot yet process. These presences can create sensations of unease, moments when something feels wrong without explanation, as if the world itself holds the imprint of past consciousness. This duality, the comforting presence and the unsettling lingering, mirrors the complexity of human emotion, suggesting that consciousness after death may reflect the same depth and contradictions we observe in life. There are also philosophical implications to consider. If consciousness can persist and wander, what does it mean for identity, memory, and time? Is the soul a continuation of who we were, a snapshot of the self at death, or a fluid, evolving presence that continues to learn and interact with the world? Perhaps wandering souls do not experience time linearly, drifting through past and present simultaneously, observing moments we perceive as fixed, but which are fluid in this subtle dimension. Such an existence would challenge our understanding of life, death, and reality itself, hinting at a universe more layered and mysterious than our waking perception allows. Even if wandering is real, it may not be accessible to everyone. Certain individuals, often described as sensitive or psychic, report heightened awareness of spirits. Others may experience subtle signs: a flickering light, a whisper of air, a feeling of being observed, without fully understanding their origin. Could this variability suggest that perception itself plays plays a role in interaction with lingering consciousness, that the soul exists independently but can only engage with those attuned to its presence. It is a delicate balance between awareness and reality, perception and existence, highlighting the mystery that surrounds life beyond the body. As we explore these possibilities, we are also confronted with questions about ethics and intention. If a consciousness can linger, does it have agency, the ability to influence the living world? Are there natural limits, rules, or unseen structures that govern this wandering state? Folklore and spiritual traditions often suggest guidance. Spirits may be able to warn, comfort, or protect, but they rarely impose without cause. It is as if wandering consciousness must navigate boundaries, respecting the living while existing in a dimension that overlaps with ours only at points of resonance, emotion, and memory. Ultimately, the idea of a soul wandering the earth after the body is gone asks us to reconsider the nature of existence. It challenges the notion that life is confined to the material, inviting us to imagine a world where consciousness is fluid, persistent, and perhaps infinitely more complex than we comprehend. Whether these presences are echoes, projections, or true continuations of identity, they enrich the tapestry of our reality, reminding us that the line between life and death may be less absolute than we imagine. In moments of stillness, when the wind shifts, when shadows stretch, when memories resurface, we may sense the subtle footprints of those who came before, hinting that the story of consciousness does not end, but transforms, continues, and in its own quiet way, wanders. As we continue to explore the possibility of consciousness persisting after the body ceases, it is natural to turn to the stories. Those vivid, often chilling accounts of people who claim to have sensed the presence of someone who has passed. These stories are not uniform. They differ in form, intensity, and emotional weight, yet they share a common thread, a sense that something, someone, remains tethered to the world we inhabit, unseen yet undeniably present. Consider the accounts of people returning to childhood homes. Many report an unexplainable feeling of familiarity that goes beyond memory. A scent, a draft, a flicker of shadow. These small details carry the weight of someone who once lived there. In some cases, residents have heard footsteps echoing in empty hallways, doors opening and closing on their own, or objects displaced with no apparent cause. These occurrences are often dismissed as tricks of the mind, but patterns emerge. Multiple witnesses, repeated experiences, and moments that coincide with intense emotional states. Could these be glimpses of consciousness lingering in the spaces it once occupied, attuned to the places it loved? There are also stories of those who claim to have experienced direct communication from the departed. Messages come in subtle ways, a favourite song playing unexpectedly, a dream so vivid it feels more like visitation than imagination, or a voice that calls a name when no one else is near. These experiences often carry a sense of comfort, as if the deceased is still participating in the world of the living, offering reassurance or guidance. Psychologists might argue that these are manifestations of grief, coping mechanisms that help the living process loss. Yet, in many accounts, the experiences are so precise, so specific, that coincidence or imagination seems unlikely. A grandmother who died years ago might appear in a dream with advice that could not have been anticipated. A friend who passed may seem to create small signs of presence in moments of distress, as if conscious awareness persists beyond physical death. Near-death experiences further complicate our understanding. While they occur at the threshold of death rather than after it, they offer insight into what consciousness might do when freed from its body. Reports consistently describe a heightened sense of awareness, vivid landscapes of light, encounters with other beings, and a profound sense of continuity. Some individuals recall observing their own bodies from a distance, perceiving events in ways that suggest consciousness is not entirely dependent on physical senses. If consciousness can operate outside the body in these moments, it is not unreasonable to consider that it might also linger afterward, moving through the environment in ways subtle and imperceptible to most. Historical and cultural accounts provide additional texture. In the Victorian era, seances and spirit photography emerged as attempts to capture evidence of lingering souls. Skeptics later exposed many fraudulent cases, yet some images and reports remain difficult to dismiss entirely. Certain photographs show anomalies, forms, shadows, and orbs that resist straightforward explanation. Across the world, cultures speak of spirits visiting sacred sites, protecting villages, or guiding travelers. In Tibet, the bardo is described as an intermediate state between death and rebirth, where consciousness may linger, reflecting on its life and attachments before moving on. These accounts, while varying in interpretation, suggest that the notion of posthumous wandering has been a consistent feature of human imagination and observation. The modern era introduces technology as a new lens for detecting lingering presence. Infrared cameras, audio recorders, and electromagnetic field detectors have captured phenomena that some interpret as signs of consciousness beyond death. Unexplained sounds in empty rooms, sudden spikes in energy readings, and images that appear only under certain conditions contribute to the ongoing debate. Skeptics warn that these tools are prone to misinterpretation, subject to environmental factors and human error. Yet the consistency of certain findings and the persistent human experiences that accompany them suggest that there may be something more than coincidence at work, a presence that, while subtle, interacts with our environment in ways we do not yet fully understand. One of the most compelling aspects of lingering consciousness is its emotional resonance. Unlike the cold, deterministic world of physics, these experiences are deeply human. They speak to love, attachment, regret, and unfinished business. A parent who cannot let go, a sibling seeking closure, a friend wanting to provide comfort. These emotional states may act as anchors, tethering consciousness to the places, people, or objects it values. In this sense, wandering is not random. It is shaped by the desires, fears, and unresolved narratives of the departed. The soul, if it exists in this form, may be drawn to points of significance, moments that once mattered, and spaces where its presence can be most felt. Yet wandering is not always benign. Many traditions warn that spirits can carry unresolved pain or anger, resulting in experiences that are disconcerting or even frightening. Tales of haunting, poltergeist activity, or malevolent apparitions often describe entities that seem trapped by trauma or unfinished business. These stories may serve as cautionary tales, reflections of the human understanding that emotion and consciousness do not simply dissipate at death. They invite us to consider that lingering presence may come in many forms, comforting, guiding, or unsettling, depending on the nature of the life that once inhabited the body. The science of consciousness adds another layer to this exploration. While mainstream neuroscience asserts that awareness arises solely from neural activity, some researchers are investigating phenomena that challenge this view. The study of quantum consciousness, though controversial, suggests that consciousness may be more fundamental than the brain itself, potentially capable of existing in states not bound by classical physics. While these theories remain speculative, they offer a framework in which wandering consciousness could exist, moving through environments, interacting with energy, and leaving subtle impressions on the physical world. Consider also the role of memory in the persistence of presence. Memory is not static, it is a living, dynamic reconstruction of experience. If consciousness continues in some form, it may be drawn to the memories it once held, gravitating toward objects, places, and people imbued with significance. In this way, wandering consciousness becomes intertwined with our own perception, creating moments where the past seems to brush against the present. The world, then, is not only a space for the living, but a landscape layered with echoes of those who came before, a palimpsest of experience, observation, and lingering awareness. What might it feel like to encounter such a presence directly? Accounts vary widely. Some describe a sudden warmth, a sensation of being watched, or a whisper that carries meaning beyond words. Others report visual phenomena, translucent figures, shadowy forms, or fleeting glimpses that vanish when focused upon. The experiences are often fleeting, subtle, and difficult to convey fully, yet they leave a lasting impression, a sense that the boundaries of life and death are permeable, and that consciousness, in some form, persists. Wandering consciousness may also interact with living beings in unexpected ways. Pets, for example, are often reported to sense presences invisible to humans, reacting with alertness, fear, or curiosity. Children, less bound by conventional perception, sometimes describe encounters with figures that adults cannot see. These interactions suggest that lingering awareness may be more accessible than we assume, operating in dimensions or perceptual ranges that overlap with, but are distinct from, ordinary human senses. The implications are profound. If consciousness can exist independently, it may subtly shape our environment, our emotions, and even our decisions in ways we do not yet recognize. There is also the notion of guidance. Many cultures describe ancestral spirits or guardian entities providing insight, warnings, or protection. These presences may be subtle, manifesting as intuition, premonition, or the sudden clarity that seems to come from nowhere. In this way, wandering consciousness is not merely a remnant, it can be active, engaged, and purposeful. It may operate within ethical or metaphysical boundaries, influencing the living in ways aligned with love, attachment, or care, rather than interference for its own sake. The possibility of wandering also invites philosophical reflection on mortality, meaning, and continuity. If consciousness persists, the rigid distinction between life and death dissolves. Existence becomes less linear, more cyclical, layered, and interconnected. The places we inhabit are not only shaped by the living, but also by the memories, emotions, and lingering presences of those who preceded us. Time may become less of a strict progression and more of a shared landscape where past, present, and lingering awareness coexist. In this context, death is transformed. It is not an end, but a shift in the nature of awareness, a movement from visible form to subtle presence, from corporeal to ethereal, from participation in the physical world to observation, reflection, and occasional interaction. Even the mundane can take on new significance. A familiar chair, a worn path, a childhood garden. These spaces may carry layers of presence, whispers of lives once lived, and consciousnesses once active. In quiet moments, when attention is focused and the mind is open, we may sense these layers brushing against our own awareness, subtle but undeniable. It is in these moments that the boundary between living and lingering becomes most porous, when the world feels alive with unseen attention, memory, and emotion. If consciousness can persist beyond the body, it raises the question, how does it exist? What form does it take, and how does it interact with the physical world? While we have spoken of wandering souls in emotional and cultural terms, there is also a more subtle, almost invisible dimension to consider, one where energy, perception, and memory intertwine. In this realm, a soul may not need a body, but it still requires some medium, a space through which it can manifest or interact with what we perceive as reality. One theory is that consciousness exists as a form of energy, not unlike the electromagnetic fields we can measure around living organisms. This energy would be subtle, dynamic, and capable of interacting with other energy in the environment. Light, sound, even human thought. If consciousness is energy, it could, in theory, continue moving and evolving after death, much like ripples that continue across water after the stone has sunk. These ripples might be imperceptible to most, but they could influence sensitive individuals, animals, or even technology, creating the phenomena often attributed to ghosts or lingering spirits. Some researchers have speculated that memory plays a crucial role in the persistence of consciousness. Memories are not just mental records, they are encoded patterns of energy and experience. A soul untethered from the body might gravitate towards spaces saturated with these patterns, particularly those charged with strong emotion. A family home, a battlefield, a childhood playground, all could become attractors for lingering consciousness, resonating with the emotional intensity stored within them. This resonance could explain why some spirits seem tied to specific locations, unable to move on, while others drift more freely, following threads of significance rather than geography. Energy, however, does not act alone. Attention, perception, and belief may amplify its effects. Human awareness is not passive, it is sensitive to subtle stimuli, especially when emotion is involved. Grief, longing, and memory create heightened perception, which can act like a tuning fork, amplifying the signals of lingering consciousness. In moments of deep reflection, sadness, or nostalgia, we may become more attuned to these presences, noticing things that otherwise pass unnoticed. It is a symbiotic relationship. The wandering consciousness is drawn to the emotionally charged environment, and the living, in turn, becomes sensitive to its presence. This interplay between energy, emotion, and perception could also explain why some encounters feel overwhelmingly real, while others are fleeting or barely perceptible. A sudden chill, a whisper, a shadow moving in the corner of vision. These may be brief interactions with a consciousness that is not fully material, but still capable of affecting the physical or perceptual world. More dramatic phenomena, like objects moving or lights flickering, could result from more concentrated energy, perhaps tied to intense emotion or unresolved conflict within the lingering consciousness. Stories of these interactions abound. In one account, a family reported that their deceased grandmother seemed to move objects subtly around the house. It was never frightening. Small things like a misplaced cup or a gently swung door. But the pattern was undeniable. The family recognized it as familiar, almost like the grandmother was still playing small caring games with them. In another instance, a young woman sensed the presence of her deceased father during moments of profound decision-making. She would feel a pressure on her shoulder or a sudden warmth, a quiet reassurance that seemed to guide her choice. These encounters, though ordinary on the surface, suggest that consciousness, even when unbound from the body, can maintain an intimate connection with the living, influencing their world in subtle but tangible ways. Animals provide another lens into this phenomenon. Pets, with their heightened senses, often react to presences invisible to humans. Dogs and cats have been reported barking, staring, or retreating at empty corners of a room, or showing sudden attention to spaces where a deceased person once stood. Could they be perceiving lingering consciousness in ways we cannot? The consistency of such observations across cultures, species, and generations suggests there is something to be noticed, a pattern that points to the existence of something beyond ordinary perception. Another fascinating aspect is the temporal nature of wandering consciousness. Time may not constrain these presences as it does the living. Reports often describe spirits appearing long after death, sometimes decades later, still tied to the locations or events that mattered most in life. This flexibility suggests that lingering consciousness may exist outside linear time, able to access moments and spaces according to its own perception rather than ours. A battlefield spirit might witness centuries of history unfolding. A parent might sense a child's milestones from afar. A friend might offer comfort during moments of crisis, regardless of distance or elapsed time. The boundaries between past, present, and future become porous, reshaping our understanding of existence itself. While much of this remains speculative, it is worth considering how consciousness might interact with human perception on a subtler level. Dreams, for instance, could serve as a bridge between the living and lingering presences. Many people report dreams in which deceased loved ones appear, offering guidance, reassurance, or even warnings. These dreams often feel more vivid and meaningful than ordinary dreams, as though they are not entirely constructed by the dreamer's mind. Could it be that wandering consciousness uses dreams as a channel, a way to communicate across the divide between life and death? Dreams, already a liminal state where reality bends and memory blurs, provide an ideal medium for interaction that is immersive, emotional, and intimate. Sound is another medium through which lingering consciousness may manifest. Unexplained voices, footsteps, or faint whispers have been reported in countless accounts. In some cases, recordings have captured phenomena that cannot be easily explained, such as words forming in patterns not consciously orchestrated by any living individual. These auditory experiences, whether perceived directly or through technology, point to the possibility that consciousness can influence the physical environment in ways subtle enough to evade conventional measurement but impactful enough to register in human perception. The question of intent arises naturally. Why would a consciousness choose to linger rather than move on? Attachment is one reason, but there may be others. Curiosity, observation, or the sheer continuation of self-awareness could drive lingering. Some traditions suggest that the soul continues to evolve after death, learning, observing, and interacting in ways that refine its awareness. In this sense, wandering is not a passive state. It is an active process of exploration, understanding, and sometimes subtle engagement with the living world. However, this wandering is not necessarily permanent. Cultural and spiritual traditions often describe processes for release, rituals that help consciousness move on, or natural transitions that allow lingering presences to dissipate or ascend. These processes may be symbolic, psychological, or metaphysical, but they suggest that lingering is not infinite. There are cycles, stages, and transitions even beyond life. For those attuned to these presences, the experience may shift over time from vivid interaction to subtle observation, eventually fading as the consciousness completes its transition. There is also a delicate ethical dimension to consider. If consciousness can linger, does it have boundaries? Can it influence the living in ways that are beneficial or harmful? Many traditions suggest that ethical principles govern the post-mortem existence of consciousness, guiding wandering spirits toward compassion, restraint, and respect. The intention behind lingering matters. A soul motivated by love or protection may manifest as subtle guidance or reassurance, while one consumed by anger or grief may create experiences that unsettle or frighten. Understanding this dynamic adds a layer of moral and emotional complexity to the concept of wandering consciousness, suggesting that the nature of life continues to echo after death, shaped by character, experience, and emotion. Science may eventually provide tools to study these phenomena with greater precision. Advances in neuroscience, quantum physics, and consciousness studies hint at the possibility that awareness is not fully confined to the brain and that it may be influenced by or influence the surrounding environment. While definitive evidence remains elusive, the convergence of anecdotal reports, cultural traditions, and emerging theoretical models suggests a reality more nuanced than conventional understanding allows. A reality in which consciousness may indeed wander, interact, and persist beyond the limits of the physical body. Ultimately, wandering consciousness forces us to reconsider the nature of presence itself. It challenges our assumptions about life, death, and identity, suggesting that awareness is not merely a product of the body, but may have a subtle, persistent existence beyond it. In contemplating this, we begin to see the world differently. Ordinary spaces become layered with memory, emotion, and unseen observation. Shadows may carry traces of lives once lived. Sounds may echo with the intention of lingering presences, and dreams may serve as bridges between the living and the departed. The familiar becomes uncanny, the mundane charged with significance, and the boundaries between past, present, and afterlife blurred in ways both comforting and unsettling. Wandering consciousness, then, is not merely a poetic notion or a ghost story. It is a lens through which we can reconsider existence itself, an invitation to explore the hidden layers of reality where memory, emotion, and awareness continue beyond the body. In recognizing the possibility that consciousness may persist, we confront not only the mystery of death, but the richness of life, the persistence of love and memory, and the subtle, enduring connections that bind us across time, space, and dimension. Throughout history, humanity has documented countless instances of lingering presences, stories in which consciousness seems to persist beyond the body, influencing the living world in subtle or unmistakable ways. These accounts are not merely folklore, they often follow consistent patterns that suggest something real, something persistent, that defies ordinary explanation. By examining these historical and contemporary accounts, we can begin to see how wandering consciousness might manifest, and why such phenomena have fascinated and unsettled us for centuries. In Europe, centuries of ghost stories detail apparitions that appear to settle conflicts, deliver warnings, or reenact moments of intense emotion. One of the earliest recorded accounts comes from the Middle Ages, describing spirits in monasteries and castles who were tethered to sites of trauma or unresolved tension. These spirits were often described with human-like form, but their behavior was inconsistent with the living. They moved silently, vanished abruptly, and sometimes interacted only indirectly, influencing objects, sounds, or the feelings of those present. Interestingly, these accounts often coincide with periods of heightened grief, loss, or societal upheaval, suggesting a connection between emotional intensity and the persistence of consciousness. One famous historical case is that of the Borley Rectory in England, often called the most haunted house in England. Multiple witnesses over decades reported a series of phenomena: footsteps in empty corridors, doors opening on their own, fleeting apparitions of monks, and even shadowy figures that seemed to observe occupants from the corners of rooms. Investigations revealed that some of these accounts could be exaggerated or fabricated, yet the consistency of many reports across independent observers is striking. It hints at the possibility that consciousness can persist, interacting with the physical world in ways subtle enough to evade direct measurement, but consistent enough to leave traces. Across the Atlantic, colonial America provides numerous reports of spirits inhabiting homes, battlefields, and graveyards. Soldiers and settlers spoke of apparitions of friends and family, sometimes appearing in moments of crisis or before significant events. One widely recounted phenomenon involved Revolutionary War soldiers reporting seeing the spirits of fallen comrades, appearing at strategic locations with warnings or guidance. Whether these experiences were manifestations of collective stress or glimpses of lingering consciousness, they reveal a persistent human perception of presence after death, often tied to strong emotion, memory, and place. Eastern traditions offer similarly compelling accounts, though interpreted through different metaphysical frameworks. In Japan, the Yurei, spirits of the dead, are thought to linger due to unresolved attachments, intense emotions, or unnatural death. These spirits are often depicted as clothed in white, floating silently and bound to the locations or people they loved or feared. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo describes an intermediate state where consciousness persists after death, experiencing visions, reflections, and interactions before moving on to rebirth. These traditions suggest that lingering consciousness is not only possible, but also structured. It has stages, intentions, and pathways, and it interacts with the living and the environment according to patterns shaped by emotion and attachment. Some contemporary cases are particularly compelling because they involve multiple witnesses or physical evidence. Consider the stories surrounding the Amityville house in the 1970s, where residents reported a host of paranormal phenomena: objects moving, unexplained sounds, and shadowy figures. Skeptics have often dismissed these events, but investigators noted consistency across multiple observers and moments when physical traces, marks, displaced objects, temperature anomalies corresponded to reports of presence. While the media sensationalized many aspects of the case, the underlying pattern aligns with other accounts of lingering consciousness. Presence tied to place, observation by sensitive individuals, and subtle interactions with the environment. Historical hauntings often share common threads. First, location matters. Homes, battlefields, hospitals, and spaces of intense emotional significance tend to attract the most reports. Second, witnesses frequently describe subtle, fleeting manifestations, sounds, shadows, or sensations rather than full-bodied apparitions. Third, these presences often appear during moments of heightened emotion or stress, suggesting that consciousness interacts with living perception through resonance rather than overt visibility. Finally, many accounts involve a purpose or pattern. The presence is observed protecting someone, offering warning, or replaying a significant memory. These patterns suggest that wandering consciousness is neither random nor chaotic. It operates according to emotional, cognitive, and perhaps energetic principles that reflect the life it once inhabited. One notable psychological aspect of these encounters is the human response to presence. People often report a simultaneous sense of familiarity and strangeness, as if the space is charged with history that is both comforting and unsettling. This duality may be a reflection of the nature of consciousness itself, capable of evoking emotion, memory, and perception in ways that overlap with, but are not identical to, those of the living. A lingering presence might not need to manifest fully. Its existence can be inferred through subtle cues: a draft in an otherwise still room, a flicker of light, a sudden shift in emotional atmosphere. These indicators suggest that consciousness is not merely bound by the physical body, but is capable of shaping the environment in ways we intuitively recognize. Interestingly, wandering consciousness often intersects with human ritual and belief. Across cultures, certain practices are designed to acknowledge, communicate with, or release lingering presences. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos honors the dead, inviting spirits to visit and interact with the living. In Scotland and Ireland, ancestral veneration sometimes includes leaving offerings at sacred sites or graves, acknowledging the ongoing presence of consciousness beyond death. These practices imply a tacit recognition that consciousness may persist, and that careful engagement, respect, or ritual can facilitate positive interaction. The prevalence of such customs across diverse cultures hints at a universal intuition about the persistence of awareness beyond the body. Historical patterns also reveal that lingering consciousness is not always benign. Ghost stories often involve unresolved emotion, anger, regret, fear, that manifests as disturbances. Poltergeist phenomena, for instance, are frequently linked to strong emotional energy, particularly among adolescents or households undergoing stress. While these occurrences are sometimes explained psychologically, they could also represent consciousness interacting with the environment in response to emotional resonance. In such cases, the lingering presence reflects not only life that has passed, but the weight of emotion that has yet to release. A reminder that consciousness may carry not only memory, but the unresolved intensity of its experiences. Science continues to explore these intersections. Parapsychology, though controversial, has amassed reports of spontaneous and controlled phenomena consistent with lingering consciousness. These include psychokinetic events, unexplained apparitions, and experiences of observation without physical presence. While mainstream science remains skeptical, these studies suggest that consciousness may interact with the environment beyond traditional sensory channels. Technologies like infrared cameras, EMF detectors, and audio recorders have provided some evidence, though interpretation is debated. Still, the repeated convergence of anecdotal, historical, and technological data cannot be ignored. It points to patterns that may reflect genuine post-mortem awareness. Even when accounts are anecdotal, the consistency is striking. Across centuries, continents, and cultures, people describe experiences that share similar characteristics: subtle observation, emotional resonance, interaction with significant places, and often a gentle guidance or warning. These patterns suggest that wandering consciousness is governed by principles that transcend cultural and individual interpretation. While skeptics argue for coincidence, projection, or psychological explanation, the ubiquity of these experiences raises the possibility of an underlying reality, a consciousness that persists, perceives, and occasionally interacts with the living world. Another intriguing aspect is the temporal stability of lingering presence. Some spirits appear soon after death, others manifest years or even decades later, seemingly tied not to immediate memory, but to long-standing emotional or historical significance. Battlefields, for example, are sites of repeated sightings long after the original conflict, suggesting that extreme events, marked by intense life, death, and emotion, imprint themselves on consciousness in ways that persist across generations. This temporal flexibility adds complexity to our understanding. Wandering consciousness may operate on a scale beyond linear time, observing, interacting, and influencing at points that defy conventional chronology. Animals, too, appear to participate in perceiving lingering presence. Cats, dogs, and even livestock have been reported behaving unusually in spaces associated with deceased individuals. They may stare, hiss, retreat, or approach areas that seem empty, reacting to energies that humans cannot perceive. These responses lend credence to the notion that consciousness persists in forms that interact with living beings, whether through subtle energy, sound, or other undetected phenomena. The sensitivity of animals suggests that lingering awareness is not entirely subjective, but can influence the material world in detectable ways, albeit often outside human perception. Ultimately, the study of historical hauntings and lingering consciousness invites a shift in perspective. We are prompted to see the world not only as a stage for the living, but as a layered landscape where memory, emotion, and awareness persist. Shadows, sounds, and spaces may carry traces of those who came before, offering comfort, guidance, or reminders of unresolved presence. Time becomes less rigid, memory becomes a tangible force, and consciousness extends beyond the confines of the body, suggesting that death is not a termination, but a transformation, a wandering into new dimensions of existence, subtle yet profoundly intertwined with the living. By observing these patterns across history, culture, and personal experience, we begin to see the possibility that wandering consciousness is real, structured, and perceptible. It is shaped by motion, memory, and significance. It is influenced by perception, sensitivity, and resonance, and it interacts with the living world in ways that are consistent, if elusive. These presences may be gentle, protective, or unsettling, but they are rarely random, reflecting the depth, complexity, and enduring nature of human consciousness beyond the body. As we move from historical accounts to the more personal and contemporary, we encounter a wealth of experiences that suggest lingering consciousness is not confined to folklore or legend. Everyday people, often without prior belief in spirits, report subtle or unmistakable interactions with those who have passed. These encounters frequently share similar features: a sense of presence, fleeting physical sensations, unusual perceptions, or the inexplicable movement of objects. While skepticism remains, the consistency and emotional intensity of these experiences make them difficult to dismiss outright. One common type of encounter is the feeling of being watched. Many people describe moments when they are alone, yet feel a quiet, persistent gaze. It may be accompanied by subtle shifts in temperature, a sensation of pressure, or a whispering wind in a closed space. Often, these sensations coincide with areas or objects that were important to the deceased: an armchair, a favorite room, or a cherished belonging. The experience is not threatening. It is more like the echo of consciousness, observing from a dimension we cannot normally perceive. Those who experience it often report a combination of awe, comfort, and slight unease, a reminder that the boundaries between the living and the departed may be thinner than assumed. Dreams provide another bridge between the living and lingering presence. People consistently report dreams in which deceased loved ones appear, delivering guidance, reassurance, or insight. These dreams are often more vivid than ordinary dreams, filled with sensory detail and emotional clarity. Unlike typical dreams, which can fade upon waking, encounters with the deceased in dreams are frequently remembered with precise detail, leaving a lasting impression. Some individuals report receiving advice or warnings that later prove accurate, suggesting that consciousness beyond the body may be capable of directed interaction with the living. In this way, dreams may function as a subtle interface between dimensions, where lingering awareness can communicate without violating the natural order of life. Physical manifestations are rarer, but also significant. Reports of objects moving without explanation, lights flickering, or doors opening spontaneously often accompany feelings of presence. In one case, a woman recounted that her deceased father would knock lightly on a table whenever she was about to make an important decision. The movement was subtle, just enough to be noticed, but not alarming. In another instance, a man reported that his childhood dog, long deceased, appeared in moments of grief, nudging him in ways that no one else could. These interactions suggest that lingering consciousness may exert influence through energy, resonance, or other subtle mechanisms, bridging the gap between the material and immaterial. Animals frequently act as unintentional intermediaries. Cats, dogs, and even birds have been observed reacting to unseen presences, staring at walls, hissing at empty corners, or following invisible paths. In many cases, the animal's behavior coincides with periods of human sensitivity, such as grief or remembrance, suggesting a complex interplay. Consciousness persists, perceivable by those attuned or sensitive, and animals may detect cues beyond human perception. These responses indicate that lingering presence is not purely subjective. It interacts with the physical world and living beings in tangible ways. Some contemporary investigations attempt to capture these phenomena using technology. Paranormal researchers employ audio recorders, electromagnetic field detectors, and infrared cameras to detect signs of lingering awareness. While results are often inconclusive, certain patterns emerge. Anomalous sounds, sudden temperature changes, and unexplained visual phenomena often occur in spaces where emotional intensity or significance is highest. Whether these measurements capture actual consciousness or merely environmental anomalies remains a topic of debate, but they provide a framework for exploring the interactions between lingering presence and the physical world. A particularly intriguing aspect of lingering consciousness is its apparent ability to interact selectively. Not everyone perceives these presences. Some individuals are more sensitive than others, able to detect subtleties invisible to the majority. Children, who are less constrained by conventional perception, often report encounters with spirits that adults cannot see. Similarly, those who are grieving or emotionally open may notice presences more readily, suggesting that perception is a key component in interaction. The soul may linger, but its manifestation is not indiscriminate. It responds to attention, resonance, and emotional connection, appearing where it is noticed and meaningful. Emotion plays a crucial role in shaping these encounters. Strong love, grief, or attachment seems to create anchors for consciousness, tethering it to specific locations, objects, or individuals. In some cases, lingering awareness appears protective, guiding the living through difficult moments. A mother's presence may be felt when a child faces danger. A partner's lingering awareness may offer comfort during profound loss. These interactions suggest that consciousness continues to carry the emotional signature of its life, influencing the living world in subtle, morally aligned ways. At the same time, lingering consciousness is not always benevolent. Accounts of restlessness, anger, or unresolved grief illustrate that consciousness can carry the weight of its experiences beyond death. Such presences often manifest as disturbances, objects moved, sounds made, or feelings of unease that are unsettling but not necessarily malevolent. These experiences remind us that consciousness, like life itself, can be complex and multifaceted, shaped by emotion, memory, and unfinished narratives. The quality of lingering presence reflects the character and experiences of the individual, suggesting continuity of self even after the body has ceased. Contemporary research into near-death experiences also informs our understanding. People who have approached death and returned often report vivid awareness, encounters with beings of light, and perceptions of continued consciousness. Some describe observing their own bodies from outside, perceiving events with clarity and emotional depth. These experiences support the notion that consciousness may operate independently of the brain, capable of perception and interaction without traditional sensory input. If so, it is plausible that after death this awareness may linger, moving through familiar spaces and occasionally influencing the living world. One of the most fascinating aspects of lingering consciousness is its subtlety. Unlike the dramatic ghost stories of popular culture, most encounters are quiet, almost imperceptible. A shadow flickering at the edge of vision, a sudden scent, a faint warmth. These moments are significant precisely because they exist on the threshold of perception, hinting at a presence that is real yet elusive, observable yet intangible. The wandering consciousness may not need to manifest dramatically. Its existence can be inferred through feeling, intuition, and the delicate interplay of environment and perception. Historical and modern accounts alike suggest that time does not constrain wandering consciousness. Spirits may appear years after death, at sites of emotional importance, or during events that resonate with the life once lived. Some report repeated interactions over months or years, as if the consciousness has chosen a rhythm or pattern for engagement. This temporal flexibility implies that lingering awareness operates differently from our own perception of time, navigating events, spaces, and emotions according to its own awareness rather than human chronology. Ethics and intention emerge as vital aspects of this phenomenon. Cultural traditions across the world suggest that the nature of lingering consciousness is influenced by moral and emotional alignment. Spirits are often depicted as protective, guiding, or instructive, while disturbances occur when unresolved emotion dominates. Rituals for the dead, prayers, and offerings are not merely symbolic. They may facilitate the resolution of lingering awareness, helping consciousness release attachment and transition. These practices suggest that interaction is governed by both natural and moral principles, reflecting the continuity of identity and the persistence of emotional and ethical patterns beyond life. Finally, the study of lingering consciousness challenges our assumptions about the limits of perception. The world may be far more layered and dynamic than ordinary experience allows. Shadows, sounds, scents, and subtle shifts in emotion may carry traces of those who have passed. Places may be repositories of awareness imbued with memory and emotion, where lingering consciousness observes, guides, or quietly interacts. Animals and sensitive individuals may serve as bridges, perceiving what others cannot. Dreams, intuition, and subtle signs become channels through which awareness persists, suggesting that death is not an endpoint but a transformation, a wandering into new forms of perception, energy, and interaction. By considering these contemporary accounts alongside historical, cultural, and anecdotal evidence, we begin to see a consistent pattern. Consciousness may linger, shaped by emotion, memory, and attachment, interacting with the living world in ways subtle but real. Whether through observation, dreams, or physical manifestation, lingering awareness appears capable of influencing the environment and those attuned to it, offering guidance, comfort, or even challenge. These patterns suggest that life does not end abruptly at the cessation of the body, but continues in forms that are subtle, layered, and profoundly intertwined with the world it leaves behind. As we move deeper into the question of lingering consciousness, we encounter a recurring theme: unfinished business. Across cultures, stories, and personal accounts, one of the most common explanations for a soul remaining in our world is that it has not completed what it needed to do during life. The concept is simple yet profound. A life lived with unresolved desires, unspoken words, or unprocessed emotions may leave the consciousness tethered to the world, lingering until closure or resolution is achieved. Unfinished business can take many forms. It may be emotional, unexpressed love, unresolved guilt, lingering anger or regret. It may be relational, a promise broken, a conversation left unspoken, or care that was never offered. It may even be practical, a task left undone, a mission unfinished, or a duty unfulfilled. These elements act as anchors, binding consciousness to physical spaces, objects, or people connected to the original experiences. A parent may linger near their child, a friend may hover around a favourite place. A lover may remain tied to the home where shared memories unfolded. The lingering presence is not random. It is drawn to the points of emotional gravity that defined life itself. Consider the case of a woman who lost her husband unexpectedly. She reported sensing him in the home, not as a frightening apparition, but as a comforting presence during moments of anxiety or grief. Over months, the sense of presence diminished until the woman felt complete closure. She had said the words she wished to speak, shared the love she longed to express, and finally accepted the absence. In this case, lingering consciousness appeared to be tied to emotional resolution. Once the unresolved feelings were addressed, the presence could move on, suggesting that the persistence of awareness is linked to the completion of emotional cycles. Historical traditions often encode similar understandings. In Japan, restless spirits, or yurei, are thought to linger because of attachment, unfinished emotion, or untimely death. Rituals, prayers, and symbolic acts are designed to release these spirits, allowing them to transition peacefully. In Tibet, the bardo recognizes a transitional state where consciousness processes experiences, resolves attachments, and prepares for rebirth. These cultural practices reflect a deep intuition that consciousness continues beyond the body, but remains influenced by emotional and cognitive patterns, and that resolution facilitates movement into the next stage of existence. Emotional intensity itself seems to amplify lingering presence. Joy, love, grief, or trauma create energetic imprints that are not easily released. Places, objects, and moments saturated with emotion may act as magnets for consciousness, holding fragments of awareness until they can fully process the energy carried. Battlefields, hospitals, homes, and schools are common sites for reported lingering presence, precisely because they are dense with emotional energy. In some cases, the intensity of unresolved emotion may create restlessness, resulting in experiences that are unsettling or confusing to the living. The idea of emotional physics emerges here, how energy, memory, and awareness might interact across dimensions. If consciousness can persist as a form of subtle energy, then emotions may serve as both the fuel and the anchor for lingering. Strong emotions create patterns that resonate with the world around them, tethering awareness to specific spaces, objects, or individuals. This resonance explains why certain places seem haunted, while others remain untouched. It is the imprint of consciousness combined with emotional intensity that creates perceptible presence. The strength and clarity of these imprints may determine how long and how vividly a soul can linger. Attachment is another factor influencing persistence. Human consciousness is inherently relational. Relationships, bonds, and connections are central to experience. They shape thought, emotion, and perception. When life ends, these relational threads may remain unbroken. A mother's love may persist toward her child. A friendship may continue across the divide. A mentor's guidance may linger for decades. These attachments function as subtle tethers, drawing consciousness to people and places where it feels needed or connected. In this sense, wandering is not aimless. It is relational, guided by the emotional and social bonds formed during life. The perception of lingering presence is often strongest during moments of heightened sensitivity, grief, stress, nostalgia, or introspection. When attention is focused and emotion is strong, awareness becomes attuned to subtle cues that would otherwise go unnoticed. A faint sound, a flicker of light, a shift in temperature, or a sensation of touch may serve as a bridge for consciousness to interact. These moments are not merely subjective, they reflect the interplay between lingering awareness and perceptual openness, suggesting that interaction requires both presence and receptivity. In other words, the living and the lingering may meet in the liminal space created by attention, emotion, and perception. Some lingering consciousnesses appear more purposeful than others. Rather than merely observing, they seem to guide, protect, or communicate. A child sensing the presence of a deceased parent during danger, a student receiving guidance in a dream from a departed teacher, or a family noticing small signs of reassurance after loss. All suggest that consciousness can act intentionally, aligning with moral, emotional, or relational priorities. These interactions hint that awareness beyond the body is not passive. It can respond, adapt, and influence in subtle ways. Yet lingering consciousness is not unlimited. Cultural traditions, anecdotal accounts, and some modern investigations suggest that persistence has boundaries. Time, emotional resolution, and the completion of relational or personal cycles may determine how long awareness remains tethered. Once emotional needs are addressed, attachments are resolved, or memory is fully processed, the consciousness may release its hold, moving on to the next stage, whatever form that may take. This dynamic suggests a system of checks and balances where the persistence of awareness serves both the living and the deceased, allowing interaction without indefinite interference. The idea of unfinished business also raises philosophical questions about the nature of identity and selfhood. If consciousness continues beyond the body, retaining emotion, memory, and attachment, then aspects of identity persist as well. The self does not vanish with the cessation of neural activity. It continues, observing, interacting, and processing. This challenges conventional assumptions about mortality, suggesting that who we are may extend beyond the boundaries of physical life. Identity becomes more fluid, more resilient, and more intricately tied to relationships, space, and emotional resonance than previously imagined. Unfinished business may also explain why some encounters are unsettling. When consciousness carries unresolved anger, guilt, or trauma, its presence may manifest as disturbances rather than comfort. Poltergeist activity, shadowy figures, or inexplicable sounds may reflect the emotional turbulence of a soul unable to release its attachments. These manifestations are not necessarily malevolent. They are expressions of unresolved experience seeking resolution. Understanding this dynamic transforms fear into comprehension. The haunting is not random cruelty, but the lingering echo of unfinished life, emotion, and awareness. This perspective aligns with the idea that lingering consciousness is relational, ethical, and purposeful. Love, protection, guidance, and warning often accompany positive or neutral experiences. Restlessness, disturbance, and unease accompany unresolved energy. The patterns are remarkably consistent across cultures and history, suggesting underlying principles that govern post-mortem awareness. These principles may operate through emotion, resonance, attachment, and intention, forming a subtle system that guides interaction between the living and the lingering. Interestingly, technology and contemporary investigation offer new insights into these dynamics. EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and audio recorders capture anomalies in environments with emotional or historical significance. While the interpretation of such anomalies remains debated, repeated observations suggest that the energy associated with lingering consciousness can have measurable effects. Moreover, anecdotal accounts often coincide with technological measurements, reinforcing the notion that persistence of awareness is not purely subjective, but may interact with the physical world in ways that can, at least partially, be observed. The emotional and relational framework also suggests that lingering consciousness may be selective. It interacts with those who are receptive, attuned, or emotionally aligned with its presence. Children, pets, sensitive individuals, and those in emotional flux are often the first to perceive lingering awareness. This selective perception reinforces the idea that interaction requires both presence and openness, a meeting of awareness across dimensions. It is not an imposition, it is a dialogue, subtle, nuanced, and often fleeting, where the energy of consciousness and the receptivity of the living converge. Finally, the concept of unfinished business emphasizes the continuity of life beyond the body. Awareness persists, shaped by emotional, relational, and cognitive patterns. It can guide, comfort, disturb, or simply observe, depending on attachment, intention, and resolution. The living world becomes a canvas for this subtle activity, where memory, space, emotion, and consciousness intertwine. The persistence of awareness offers a profound reflection. Life is not neatly confined to the physical body, but extends through the emotional and relational fabric of the world, leaving traces, echoes, and interactions that continue long after the body ceases. In contemplating unfinished business, we begin to see that wandering consciousness is not random or chaotic. It is relational, emotionally grounded, and purpose-driven. It is shaped by the experiences, attachments, and unresolved aspects of life. It can be comforting, guiding, or unsettling, reflecting the depth and complexity of human existence. And it reminds us that death may not be an ending, but a transition, an evolution from corporeal presence to subtle awareness, where consciousness continues to exist, interact, and influence the world in ways both delicate and profound. As we move deeper into the phenomenon of lingering consciousness, we encounter extraordinary cases, those rare, vivid, and sometimes unsettling experiences that push the boundaries of understanding. These accounts are compelling not only because of their intensity, but also because they reveal the subtle interplay between the departed and the living world, suggesting that consciousness can persist in ways both perceptible and profound. One remarkable pattern in such accounts is the precision with which lingering consciousness appears to operate. Unlike random disturbances, these manifestations often occur in ways that are meaningful to the living. A soldier returning home decades after battle might report sensing the guidance of fallen comrades in moments of danger. A person grieving the sudden loss of a parent might feel a comforting presence precisely when facing a life-altering decision. These experiences are rarely violent or chaotic. They are intentional, directed, and relational, implying that consciousness beyond the body retains awareness, memory, and a moral compass. Some extreme cases involve prolonged, repeated interactions over time. In one widely reported phenomenon, a family experienced the ongoing presence of a deceased matriarch over several years. The presence was subtle at first: cold drafts, faint sounds, occasional misplaced objects, but gradually became more interactive. Objects moved purposefully, doors opened to direct attention, and even auditory whispers provided guidance or comfort. Over time, the family reported a sense of dialogue, a non-verbal exchange that seemed intentional and relational. Eventually, as emotional closure was reached, the manifestations ceased, reinforcing the idea that lingering consciousness is influenced by emotional attachment, unfinished business, and relational need. In other cases, individuals report near continuous interaction with a deceased person, often in dreamlike states or semi-lucid moments. These encounters can be extraordinarily vivid, involving full sensory experience: sight, sound, touch, and even smell. People describe the sensation of being guided, warned, or reassured in ways that seem beyond coincidence or imagination. The precision of these experiences, timing, content, and emotional resonance, suggests a degree of consciousness that retains intention and agency, even without a physical body. Such experiences challenge the assumption that awareness is strictly tied to neural activity, hinting at a more fundamental, persistent quality to consciousness. Historical accounts also include extreme manifestations of lingering presence, particularly in locations associated with intense emotional energy. Battlefields, plague hospitals, and disaster sites often report repeated sightings and phenomena that span generations. These include apparitions appearing at the same time of day, objects displaced in consistent patterns, and sensory impressions that align with historical events. Soldiers have recounted seeing their fallen comrades performing the same movements or appearing in familiar formations long after death. While skeptics may attribute this to imagination, collective memory, or environmental factors, the consistency of reports across independent observers suggests a more structured interaction, one in which consciousness is not only persisting, but also interacting according to recognizable patterns. Extreme phenomena are not limited to visual or auditory experiences. Some reports involve tactile sensations: a brush of a hand, a gentle pressure, or even the feeling of being guided physically. Individuals often describe these sensations as unmistakably intentional, aligned with comfort, protection, or guidance. In other cases, lingering consciousness appears to influence events indirectly. Objects shift in ways that convey messages, lights flicker to signal attention, or ambient temperature changes signal presence. These subtle interactions point to a capacity for awareness to influence the environment without fully manifesting physically, a bridge between perception, energy, and consciousness. Dreams and visions play a particularly significant role in these extraordinary cases. Individuals frequently report encounters in which deceased loved ones provide detailed guidance, reveal unknown information, or communicate insights that could not have been predicted by the dreamer's mind. Such experiences often feel more vivid and emotionally powerful than ordinary dreams, leaving a lasting impression. In some cases, multiple people report similar experiences, receiving guidance or sensing presence simultaneously, suggesting that consciousness may be capable of interaction across individuals, linking awareness beyond the constraints of the physical body. Animals again appear as sensitive detectors in extreme cases. Cats and dogs often respond to presences invisible to humans, staring intently at walls, reacting with fear or curiosity, or following unseen paths. Livestock and even wild animals have been reported reacting in ways that correspond with moments of lingering awareness, suggesting that consciousness may exert influence on living beings beyond humans. The responses of animals lend credibility to the idea that lingering consciousness is not purely psychological, but may operate through subtle, energetic, or perceptual channels. Some extreme cases also suggest a temporal fluidity to lingering consciousness. Apparitions, sounds, or sensations often occur at times of significance. Anniversaries of death, or moments associated with strong emotion. Witnesses report experiencing presences decades after death, seemingly unconstrained by linear time. This temporal flexibility implies that awareness beyond the body may operate according to its own temporal logic, capable of revisiting meaningful moments, observing significant events, and interacting selectively with the living when resonance is highest. Intentionality is another striking aspect of these phenomena. Unlike random occurrences, extreme cases often involve actions that appear purposeful. Guidance, protection, or communication is frequently aligned with ethical, relational, or emotional priorities. A deceased parent may guide a child through danger. A friend may provide reassurance during emotional crisis, or a mentor may deliver instruction through dreams or subtle signs. These actions suggest that lingering consciousness retains memory, moral orientation, and the capacity to focus awareness, implying that post-mortem consciousness is not inert but dynamic, relational, and intentional. While most extraordinary cases are benign or even comforting, some are unsettling, reflecting unresolved emotion or attachment. Intense anger, fear, or trauma can manifest as disturbances. Objects displaced, shadows observed, or sensations of pressure or discomfort. These experiences are rarely malevolent. They reflect the lingering echo of unresolved emotion. Understanding these phenomena as expressions of persistence rather than random malevolence transforms fear into comprehension. The presence is an extension of consciousness, carrying the energy, intent, and unresolved narrative of life. Scientific inquiry continues to explore these extreme phenomena. While mainstream neuroscience maintains that consciousness arises from neural activity, parapsychology and consciousness studies examine the possibility of awareness existing independently of the brain. Studies of near-death experiences, psychokinesis, and anomalous perception suggest that consciousness may be more fundamental than traditionally assumed. While evidence remains controversial, repeated patterns across historical, cultural, and contemporary accounts lend weight to the notion that awareness can persist, perceive, and interact beyond the physical body. Extraordinary cases also highlight the subtlety of lingering consciousness. The most profound experiences are often quiet, easily overlooked, yet deeply meaningful. A shift in air pressure, a fleeting shadow, a whisper of sound, a sudden warmth. These moments exist on the threshold of perception, suggesting that presence does not require full visibility to be real. Awareness may operate through influence, resonance, and interaction rather than direct manifestation, a subtle form of existence that aligns with the patterns observed in history, culture, and anecdotal reports. Importantly, these phenomena suggest a relational quality to lingering consciousness. Interaction is not indiscriminate. It occurs in alignment with emotional, relational, or moral resonance. Children, sensitive individuals, and those in emotional flux are most likely to perceive presence. Animals often act as intermediaries, detecting subtle cues beyond human perception. And in moments of attentiveness, grief, or reflection, the living may serve as a conduit, enabling dialogue, observation, or guidance. In this sense, wandering consciousness is not a passive echo. It is relational, responsive, and deeply entwined with the living world. Ethics, intention, and purpose emerge as central features of extreme phenomena. Positive experiences, protection, guidance, reassurance, reflect love, attachment, and resolution. Disturbances reflect unresolved emotion, trauma, or unfinished business. In both cases, the manifestations suggest that consciousness continues to carry the qualities, priorities, and emotional signature of life. The persistence of awareness is not random. It is guided by emotional resonance, ethical alignment, and relational significance, forming a subtle system of interaction between the living and the departed. Finally, these extraordinary cases invite us to reconsider the boundaries of life and death. Consciousness, it appears, may persist, interact, and evolve independently of the body. Time, space, and perception are fluid in this realm. Emotion, memory, and attachment act as anchors, and the living world becomes a stage for subtle interaction. Shadows, sounds, and sensations carry traces of awareness. Dreams and intuition become channels for communication. Animals serve as sensitive detectors, and historical and contemporary patterns reveal consistent behaviors that suggest real, structured, lingering consciousness. By examining extraordinary cases, we see that wandering awareness is not merely speculative. It is dynamic, relational, intentional, and persistent. It manifests in ways that are subtle or vivid, comforting or unsettling, but always consistent with the emotional, relational, and moral patterns of life. These cases push the boundaries of understanding, revealing a dimension where consciousness continues to exist, perceive, and influence. A realm that challenges assumptions, expands perception, and invites deep reflection on the nature of life, death, and the persistence of self. As we explore the phenomenon of lingering consciousness, we find that it is not confined to individual experiences. Many accounts suggest that these presences can influence collective perception, affecting entire communities, families, or groups. Places, objects, and shared experiences often carry emotional imprints that resonate with multiple individuals, creating a sense of shared awareness. These collective interactions offer some of the most compelling evidence that consciousness can persist beyond the body, shaping the world in subtle but meaningful ways. One of the most striking patterns occurs in shared spaces with intense emotional significance. Historic sites, battlefields, and religious centers often generate consistent reports of presences, independent of individual belief or expectation. Visitors frequently report feeling observed, sensing guidance, or experiencing subtle environmental changes. Fluctuating temperatures, shifting lights, or unaccountable sounds. Remarkably, these experiences are reported by multiple independent witnesses, suggesting that lingering awareness may not only persist but also interact with groups simultaneously. In these situations, consciousness may operate on a level beyond the individual, resonating with collective memory, emotion, or attention. Family homes often provide a microcosm of this phenomenon. Generations of occupants may report the same subtle disturbances: footsteps on empty stairs, doors opening, or the sensation of a watchful presence. These interactions often coincide with emotionally charged events, such as anniversaries, holidays, or moments of grief. In some cases, multiple family members perceive the presence at the same time, reinforcing the idea that consciousness can interact simultaneously with multiple individuals. Such collective experiences suggest that lingering awareness may have a relational dimension, not only to specific people, but also to the emotional and historical context of shared spaces. Cultural rituals further illustrate collective awareness. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos celebrates the presence of ancestors, inviting families to honor the deceased and create a space for interaction. In Japan, festivals like Obon encourage the return of ancestral spirits, allowing communities to participate in collective acknowledgement. These practices suggest that consciousness may be influenced by collective attention and ritual, becoming more perceptible or interactive when recognized and honored by multiple individuals. Emotional resonance amplified across a community may create a channel through which lingering awareness can manifest, providing guidance, reassurance, or subtle presence. Historical communities also report collective experiences linked to lingering consciousness. Settlements near battlefields, plague sites, or locations of significant tragedy often recount repeated phenomena across decades. Witnesses describe apparitions, unexplainable sounds, and environmental shifts that seem coordinated with historical events. These patterns are not attributable to individual perception alone. They persist across generations, suggesting that consciousness may interact with collective memory or shared spaces in ways that extend beyond individual sensory experience. In other words, lingering awareness may not only interact with the living, but also leave enduring imprints that multiple generations can perceive. Extraordinary collective encounters often involve shared dreams or visions. Groups of individuals sometimes report receiving guidance, warnings, or insight from deceased individuals simultaneously. For example, communities may recount dreams in which ancestors appear, offering advice or warnings related to events unfolding in the present. These shared experiences indicate that lingering consciousness can influence perception across multiple minds, establishing a kind of networked interaction that transcends the limitations of individual experience. Such phenomena suggest that awareness beyond the body may operate in a relational, collective dimension, sensitive to group attention, emotion, and intent. Animals again serve as subtle conduits for collective perception. Pets or domesticated animals often respond to presences in ways that multiple humans can observe, acting as intermediaries that reinforce awareness. Dogs, cats, and even livestock may collectively react to shifts in energy or presence, alerting multiple individuals simultaneously. This interplay between consciousness, animal sensitivity, and human attention highlights the multi-layered nature of lingering awareness, where interaction occurs across species and perceptual channels, creating a collective perceptual experience. Emotional intensity magnifies collective perception. In communal spaces, the resonance of grief, joy, fear, or celebration can amplify lingering consciousness, making it more perceptible to groups. Cemeteries, memorials, or sites of collective trauma are often hotspots for reported activity, where the combined emotional energy of the living interacts with the persistence of consciousness to create shared experience. These interactions are often subtle, a shift in the wind, a flicker of light, a sensation of being observed, but collectively they reinforce the perception of presence, suggesting that lingering awareness is sensitive to both emotional and relational amplification. Technology provides additional insights into collective perception. Audio recordings, cameras, and electromagnetic detectors often capture phenomena coinciding with moments when multiple people report sensing a presence. Unexplained noises, visual anomalies, and temperature fluctuations frequently align with shared awareness, indicating that lingering consciousness may interact with collective attention and perception in measurable ways. While interpretation remains debated, the correlation between technology, emotional resonance, and human observation suggests that collective awareness may enhance or stabilize the manifestation of lingering presence. The ethics and intention of lingering consciousness also extend to collective interaction. Just as individual encounters may be guided by moral and emotional alignment, group experiences often carry a relational and ethical dimension. Protective or reassuring presences appear to guide, comfort, or observe communities in ways that align with prior relationships, collective memory, or moral priorities. Disturbances, when they occur, often reflect unresolved emotion or historical trauma, again highlighting that the persistence of consciousness is shaped by ethical, emotional, and relational patterns. Collective interaction, therefore, is not random. It is patterned, purposeful, and aligned with the emotional and moral signature of the consciousness involved. Historical cases of collective haunting often illustrate these principles. For instance, the Tower of London has long been associated with multiple apparitions. Anne Boleyn, Henry VI, and other historical figures have been reported by countless visitors over centuries. Witnesses independently report similar experiences: shadows, sounds, sensations, and sightings. These repeated reports suggest that the consciousness of individuals long past can resonate across space and time, creating a persistent collective awareness observable by many. Similarly, accounts from ancient battlefields describe soldiers perceiving the presence of fallen comrades across decades, demonstrating that lingering consciousness can extend its influence over communities and locations simultaneously. Interestingly, collective perception may be influenced by expectation and attention, but it is not entirely dependent on belief. Skeptics, visitors with no prior expectation, and children often perceive these presences alongside believers, indicating that lingering awareness interacts with multiple layers of attention, emotion, and perception. This suggests that consciousness is capable of adapting its manifestation according to the receptivity of those present, amplifying signals where they can be perceived while remaining subtle or undetectable elsewhere. In this way, lingering presence operates dynamically within social and environmental contexts, reinforcing relational and emotional significance. Animals, again, play a subtle but significant role. Pets often react to presences independently of human expectation, suggesting that collective perception is multi-layered. Humans, animals, and environment may all participate in the reception of lingering consciousness. Dogs staring at empty spaces, cats following unseen paths, or horses reacting to inexplicable movements can trigger awareness in multiple humans, creating a shared sense of presence. This interplay underscores that consciousness may persist across dimensions, interacting with perceptual channels beyond individual human senses, contributing to collective experience. The interplay between collective perception and lingering consciousness highlights the layered nature of reality. Places, objects, and emotional resonance become conduits for awareness. Attention and emotional focus act as amplifiers, and the relational and ethical dimensions of consciousness guide interaction. In these contexts, the world itself becomes a network of perceptual nodes where lingering awareness can manifest, interact, and influence multiple individuals simultaneously. Collective perception reinforces the patterns observed in individual encounters, suggesting that consciousness persists not only as a solitary phenomenon, but also as a social, relational, and communal presence. Finally, considering collective perception deepens our understanding of life and death. The persistence of awareness beyond the body, its interaction with groups, and its sensitivity to emotion and attention suggest that consciousness is not merely an individual construct, but a dynamic, relational force, capable of shaping experience across multiple layers of reality. Shadows, sounds, and sensations carry traces of past lives. Shared spaces become repositories of memory and emotion. Rituals and attention amplify awareness. And communities participate, consciously or unconsciously, in the manifestation of lingering presence. Life, in this sense, continues beyond the body, interwoven with the living, the environment, and the collective memory of those who remain. By examining collective experiences, we see that lingering consciousness is relational, intentional, and profoundly connected to both space and community. It operates through emotional resonance, attention, and perception, interacting with multiple individuals simultaneously. These patterns suggest that post-mortem awareness is not solitary or random, but structured, ethical, and relational, an enduring presence that persists in the shared fabric of the living world, influencing perception, memory, and emotion across time and space. As we approach the more scientific and analytical side of lingering consciousness, we encounter an intriguing intersection of observation, psychology, and physics. While personal accounts and historical evidence suggest that awareness may persist after death, researchers have long sought to understand the mechanisms behind these experiences, asking whether consciousness is purely subjective or if it can influence the world in observable, measurable ways. One avenue of investigation involves the study of anomalous perception, instances in which individuals detect events, presences, or information that appear to be beyond conventional sensory input. These experiences, often reported in haunted locations or during encounters with the deceased, suggest that human perception is not fully limited to the five senses. Psychologists and parapsychologists have documented consistent patterns. Witnesses report seeing apparitions, hearing unexplained sounds, or feeling tactile sensations in ways that correspond to historical events or personal narratives. While mainstream science often attributes these phenomena to expectation, memory, or stress, the consistency and specificity of reports challenge purely psychological explanations. Near-death experiences, NDLs, provide compelling evidence that consciousness can operate independently of the physical body. Individuals who have approached death and returned often report vivid awareness, observing events, perceiving interactions, and experiencing emotions with clarity that surpasses normal sensory perception. Some describe leaving their bodies entirely, witnessing surroundings from above, or interacting with other entities. These experiences suggest that awareness is not strictly confined to the brain. If consciousness can operate outside the body during life-threatening situations, it is plausible that it continues after death, interacting with the living environment and resonating with memory, emotion, and relational significance. Studies of mediumship and psychic perception also intersect with lingering consciousness. Mediums report receiving messages, sensations, or impressions from individuals who have passed. These communications often involve detailed, specific information that the medium could not have known through conventional means. While skepticism remains, the repeated accuracy and consistency across independent accounts suggest that consciousness may persist and be capable of focused interaction. In some cases, these interactions are subtle: guidance in decision-making, emotional reassurance, or the transmission of memories. Such phenomena reinforce the idea that awareness may not only linger, but also retain the capacity for intentional, ethical action. Another area of investigation involves the measurement of environmental anomalies associated with lingering presence. Researchers have noted patterns of fluctuating electromagnetic fields, localized temperature shifts, and unexplained movements in spaces associated with intense emotional or historical significance. While these anomalies may have alternative explanations, drafts, faulty wiring, or instrumentation error, their correlation with reports of presence cannot be ignored. In particular, anomalies often occur in clusters or coincide with moments of heightened attention, suggesting that consciousness may interact with physical energy fields in subtle ways. These observations hint at a bridge between mind, environment, and residual awareness, offering a potential mechanism for how lingering consciousness manifests in the material world. Quantum physics has also inspired speculation about the persistence of awareness. Some theorists propose that consciousness may exist at a fundamental level, intertwined with the fabric of reality itself. Concepts like non-locality, the idea that particles can influence each other instantaneously across distance, raise the possibility that consciousness is not strictly confined to the body. If awareness can operate independently of space and time at a quantum level, It may persist after physical death, interacting with living beings, environments, and even other consciousnesses. While these ideas remain speculative, they provide a framework for considering lingering presence in terms beyond conventional neuroscience. Memory and emotion play a critical role in these phenomena. Many reports suggest that the intensity of emotional experience during life correlates with the persistence of consciousness. Trauma, love, grief, and attachment seem to act as anchors, tethering awareness to specific locations, people, or objects. These anchors create a resonance that makes lingering presence perceptible, not only to sensitive individuals, but sometimes to groups, communities, and even animals. The energetic signature of emotion may interact with the environment, subtly influencing perception, sensation, and even physical systems. This interplay suggests that lingering consciousness is dynamic, relational, and responsive to both internal and external conditions. Cognitive neuroscience also offers insights. The brain encodes memory, emotion, and attention in complex patterns of neural activity. During intense experiences, trauma, love, or grief, the brain creates highly durable, multidimensional representations of events. Some theorists propose that these patterns may continue to exist in subtle form beyond death, not as disembodied thought, but as persistent informational imprints capable of interacting with the environment and perceptual systems of the living. In other words, consciousness may have an energetic or informational component that outlives the body, capable of subtle influence and perception. Studies in parapsychology have explored psychokinesis and microphysical interaction as potential avenues for lingering consciousness. Individuals report subtle effects, objects shifting without visible cause, fluctuations in energy readings, or anomalies coinciding with emotional focus. While controversial, these observations suggest that consciousness may not be entirely confined to neural activity, and that lingering awareness may interact with the environment through mechanisms yet to be fully understood. Energy, resonance, and intention may form the medium through which presence manifests, allowing for perception and interaction without overt physical form. Dream research also intersects with lingering consciousness. Sleep is a state in which the brain is more receptive to subtle signals, intuitive insight, and non-linear experience. Reports of deceased individuals appearing in dreams, providing guidance, warnings, or comfort, suggest that awareness beyond the body may utilize the dreaming mind as a channel for interaction. These experiences are often more vivid and emotionally resonant than ordinary dreams, leaving lasting impressions on memory. The specificity and relevance of such encounters imply that lingering consciousness can act with intentionality, choosing moments and individuals for interaction according to emotional and relational significance. Collective and relational dynamics play a further role. As explored in Part 8, lingering consciousness often interacts not only with individuals, but with groups, communities, and environments imbued with emotional significance. Shared attention and emotional focus amplify the perceptibility of presence. Communities report consistent phenomena across generations. Repeated sightings, environmental anomalies, and collective experiences of guidance or observation. These patterns suggest that lingering awareness may operate across multiple perceptual channels simultaneously, interacting with both individual and collective consciousness. The ethical and intentional dimension of lingering consciousness is reinforced by these observations. Manifestations often align with moral and relational priorities: protection, guidance, reassurance, or the continuation of relational bonds. Disturbances often reflect unresolved emotion, trauma, or unfinished business. In both cases, the behavior of lingering awareness is patterned, suggesting that consciousness beyond the body retains memory, emotion, and intention, and operates in alignment with the moral and relational context of its prior life. Even skeptics concede the significance of pattern. While individual reports may be dismissed as coincidence, hallucination, or expectation, the convergence of historical, anecdotal, and contemporary data across cultures and centuries suggests a consistent phenomenon. Apparitions, environmental anomalies, dream encounters, and collective experiences converge around themes of emotional resonance, relational attachment, and intentional interaction. The persistence of these patterns challenges the assumption that consciousness ceases entirely with the body, suggesting instead a continuity that can manifest in subtle, perceptible, and relational ways. In conclusion, scientific and observational inquiry into lingering consciousness offers compelling, if provisional, frameworks for understanding the phenomenon. Awareness may persist beyond neural activity, influenced by emotional intensity, relational attachment, and environmental resonance. It may interact subtly with physical systems, perceptual channels, and collective experience. Dreams, intuition, and anomalous perception provide channels for interaction, while technology offers tentative means of measurement. Together, these observations suggest that consciousness is not strictly bound by the body or linear time, and that lingering presence may be a dynamic, relational, and enduring aspect of reality. By integrating historical, cultural, anecdotal, and scientific perspectives, we see that lingering awareness is not merely a myth or delusion. It is relational, patterned, and persistent, influenced by emotion, attachment, and intention, capable of interaction with individuals, groups, and environments, and perceptible through subtle channels. The evidence, while not definitive in the scientific sense, strongly suggests that consciousness may survive bodily death, wandering in ways both subtle and profound, and leaving traces in the world it once inhabited. Having traced the phenomenon of lingering consciousness through history, personal experience, collective perception, and scientific inquiry, we arrive at the broader implications. What does it mean that awareness may persist beyond the body, interacting subtly or vividly with the living world? How does this reshape our understanding of life, death, and the continuity of self? These questions touch not only on metaphysics, but on the way we live, remember, and relate to one another. One of the most striking lessons is the persistence of identity. Across all accounts, from medieval hauntings to contemporary experiences, consciousness appears to retain aspects of personality, memory, and emotion after the cessation of the body. A mother's protective presence, a friend's comforting guidance, or the echo of unresolved grief all suggest that what we consider the self does not vanish with neural activity. Identity, in this view, is multi-layered. It encompasses the physical body, the emotional and cognitive patterns shaped during life, and a subtle awareness capable of persisting beyond death. The continuity of self challenges conventional ideas of finality and invites a deeper reflection on what it means to exist. Attachment emerges as a central principle. Strong bonds, whether emotional, relational, or spatial, act as anchors for lingering awareness. Love, grief, regret, or devotion can tether consciousness to people, places, or objects, creating subtle interactions that the living may perceive. This relational persistence underscores that life and death are not isolated events, but part of a continuum of connection. Human relationships extend beyond physical presence. Memory and emotion are not merely abstract. They can shape awareness, influence perception, and maintain the threads of interaction across realms. The concept of unfinished business provides a framework for understanding the purpose of lingering consciousness. Presence often lingers until emotional, relational, or moral cycles are resolved. Guidance, reassurance, or subtle disturbance may reflect the work of consciousness seeking closure, for itself, for the living, or for both. In this way, lingering awareness is not random or chaotic. It operates according to the principles of relational significance and emotional completion. Life's unresolved aspects are not only experienced by the living, they can echo through the awareness that continues after death. Collective awareness further expands our perspective. Lingering consciousness is not limited to individuals. It can interact with communities, shared spaces, and generational memory. Historic sites, family homes, and cultural rituals demonstrate that attention, ritual, and emotional resonance amplify the presence of awareness. Communities, knowingly or unknowingly, participate in the perception of lingering consciousness, creating a network of interaction that spans time and space. In these shared contexts, presence becomes a communal phenomenon, relational, ethical, and emotionally attuned. Scientific and technological inquiry hints at possible mechanisms suggesting that consciousness may not be strictly confined to neural activity. Environmental anomalies, dream interactions, and anomalous perception suggest that awareness may operate through subtle, energetic, informational, or quantum channels. While definitive proof remains elusive, these observations align with patterns seen in historical and contemporary accounts. They suggest that lingering consciousness may be a fundamental aspect of reality, capable of influencing perception, interaction, and memory beyond the limits of the physical body. Emotion remains a central driver. Intense joy, grief, love, or trauma leaves energetic imprints that are perceptible to sensitive individuals, groups, or even animals. Emotional resonance acts as both anchor and amplifier, shaping the form, intensity, and duration of lingering presence. This emotional physics underscores the profound interconnection between mind, environment, and awareness, suggesting that consciousness is not only persistent but also dynamically responsive to relational and emotional conditions. Perception, attention, and openness are equally important. Lingering awareness often requires a receptive audience to interact meaningfully. Children, sensitive individuals, or those in heightened emotional states are more likely to perceive presence. Attention, focus, and emotional openness act as channels for interaction, creating moments where awareness can be observed, felt, or intuitively sensed. These dynamics suggest a co-creative aspect to lingering consciousness. It is not imposed, but engages where perception, emotion, and resonance allow. Ethical and intentional dimensions are also central. The behavior of lingering consciousness often reflects moral and relational priorities. Protection, guidance, reassurance, and observation dominate positive manifestations, while disturbances reflect unresolved grief, anger, or trauma. In this way, consciousness beyond the body retains qualities shaped by life, preserving personality, moral orientation, and relational context. Presence is guided by intent, emotional significance, and relational alignment, reinforcing that awareness after death is not chaotic but patterned, ethical, and meaningful. Time itself appears fluid in this realm. Encounters with lingering awareness often occur long after death, during anniversaries, critical life events, or emotionally charged moments. Apparitions, subtle signs, and dreams may emerge decades later, defying linear chronology. This temporal flexibility suggests that consciousness beyond the body does not experience time as the living do. Instead, it operates according to relational, emotional, and situational significance, allowing awareness to revisit, observe, and influence events when resonance is highest. Cultural practices worldwide reflect an intuitive understanding of these dynamics. Rituals for the dead, ancestral veneration, and commemorative festivals acknowledge the persistence of consciousness and provide frameworks for interaction, release, or communication. These practices demonstrate that humans across time and place have recognized the relational, emotional, and ethical dimensions of lingering awareness. They also highlight a universal principle. Consciousness may persist, but its interaction with the living is structured, relational, and responsive to recognition, attention, and intention. Animals provide an additional window into this continuity. Pets, livestock, and even wildlife often perceive presences imperceptible to humans. Their reactions, staring, following, alertness, or avoidance, suggest that lingering consciousness operates across perceptual channels beyond our ordinary senses. Animals serve as intermediaries or detectors, reinforcing the relational and perceptual dimension of lingering awareness. Their responses hint that consciousness interacts with the living environment in subtle ways, bridging perception and reality across species. Dreams and visions act as another critical interface. Many encounters with lingering consciousness occur in sleep, where the mind is receptive to subtle signals and non-linear experience. Deceased individuals often appear in dreams to guide, comfort, warn, or communicate insight. These experiences are vividly real, emotionally potent, and often remembered with clarity. Dreams may provide a channel for intentional interaction, where consciousness beyond the body can convey messages, foster connection, or offer resolution without violating the natural order of life. Ultimately, the persistence of awareness offers a radical reframing of death. Life does not end abruptly at the cessation of the body. Consciousness may continue, shaped by emotion, memory, attachment, and relational significance. Presence is subtle yet meaningful, visible or perceptible through dreams, intuition, sensation, or environmental interaction. It is structured, ethical, relational, and dynamically responsive, bridging the living and the departed in ways both delicate and profound. Death, in this light, is not an erasure, but a transformation, a transition from corporeal presence to subtle, enduring awareness. This perspective invites reflection on the nature of life itself. Our actions, attachments, and emotions resonate beyond immediate perception, leaving traces that may persist long after our physical presence ceases. Relationships, memory, and moral choices may influence not only the living world, but also the persistence of awareness beyond it. Life, therefore, is not only about the immediate experience, but also about the enduring echo of consciousness, its influence, resonance, and relational impact. To contemplate lingering consciousness is to reconsider the boundaries of existence. The world may be layered with perception, memory, and awareness that extends beyond the living body. Shadows, sounds, sensations, and dreams carry traces of the departed. Attention, emotion, and ritual amplify these presences, and both individuals and communities participate in the perception and interaction of awareness beyond the body. Consciousness, in this view, is not confined by time, space, or physical form. It continues, subtle, relational, and profoundly connected to life it once inhabited. As we reflect on these possibilities, we may find comfort, awe, or even inspiration. The presence of consciousness beyond death suggests that life is not entirely lost, that identity and awareness continue in subtle ways, and that emotional, relational, and moral patterns endure. Whether observed in shadows, dreams, environmental anomalies, or communal experience, lingering awareness reminds us of the continuity of life, the depth of connection, and the profound persistence of consciousness itself. In the end, the question is not only whether consciousness lingers after death, but how we live in light of that possibility. Our relationships, choices, and emotional resonance carry meaning beyond our immediate perception. The awareness we cultivate, the love we express, and the unresolved emotions we address may shape not only our lives, but also the lingering presence of consciousness in ways we cannot fully measure. Life and death, seen through this lens, are not opposites, but part of a continuum, a flowing, relational, and enduring tapestry of awareness. Whether subtle or vivid, comforting or unsettling, The persistence of consciousness challenges our assumptions, expands perception, and invites deep reflection. It suggests that existence is more layered than we imagine, that death may be a doorway rather than an end, and that consciousness, in all its relational, emotional, and ethical complexity, continues to weave through the living world long after the body has gone. The echoes of life remain, wandering quietly, perceptibly, and profoundly, reminding us that awareness may never truly disappear.